to continue talking about the seven limb puja, or the seven branch prayer. We talked about prostrations last time, and like I said, I'm talking more in a personal sense here to give you some ideas about how to meditate on this, not in a teacher sense of, this is how you visualize and so on. So offerings, yeah. So, if I'm going to talk about it personally, this is something that at the beginning, like prostrations, I didn't resonate very well, because I have quite a practical mind, and the idea of making all these beautiful offerings, to me, the way I live my life, that would be a big waste, because we want to conserve the world resources, and we want to use money frugally and not for things that aren't really necessary. And so, the way mine works, buying all these beautiful things just because they're beautiful doesn't have much sense. And to show you how I did it, the first time I had an appointment with Lama Yeshe, or maybe it was the second time, because you always bring an offering, when you have a thing. I brought him a box of nails. Because this was at Kopan, they were building, they needed nails. I knew if I brought a box of incense, that it would go back into the shop and get sold to the next person, and that it wouldn't be used at all. And so I want to give things that are practical, that somebody can use. So, this whole thing of, imagining all sorts of beautiful things and skies full of offerings, I just couldn't relate to, Also because the way my mind works is, I think as a nun, I don't possess many physical things. And so the idea of giving physical things, even, visualized, doesn't resonate. But I can imagine monasteries filled with monastics who are studying and meditating and teaching, and I can imagine people going into poverty-stricken areas and setting up clinics and food banks, and that kind of offering, I can really resonate with, because my feeling is, if to show reverence to the Buddha, the way I would do it is by doing things for sentient beings, because that's who the Buddha cares the most about. The Buddha doesn't care about apples and oranges on the altar. The Buddha cares about sentient beings' happiness and suffering. So if I'm going to give something, I should give something that makes that happen. Okay, so this is the way my mind thinks, yeah? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, Shantideva, when he talks about it, there's some verses really saying, if you care about the three jewels, you've got to care about sentient beings, because, the whole reason the Buddha became a Buddha is to benefit sentient beings. So just thinking, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha are great, and forget sentient beings, if you think that way, then your mind isn't going in the right, it's missing something. Okay, so I can relate to all this stuff. And, yeah, but then I would see, some of my fellow monastics loved this kind of thing. And I remember when I was living at Deer Park, there was one nun who, she loved making these beautiful floral arrangements for Geshe-la, just beautiful things. And then for the long life puja, decorating everything with strings of flowers and flags and I have to admit it was very beautiful. But what was more beautiful is the joy she took about doing it, because this wasn't a person who was usually so happy. You know, she was often complaining and unhappy, but when she made offerings, she just was a really different person. It was really quite amazing to see. So that made me start to think a little bit that, you know, maybe there was something more to this offering thing than, than I was thinking. And so I started trying to, you know, to do the visualized offerings. I always made material offerings, you know. After a while, I just started doing financial offerings because, you know, how many boxes of incense can somebody use, or candles or whatever? And so, especially when you're traveling to India, you can't carry a lot of heavy things. And so money was always useful. So I used to do that. But the visualized things, you know. So then I started trying to do those. And I found that, very interestingly, when I visualized beautiful things, my mind became happy. You know, it was very different than when I just visualized, you know, just average things. But when I tried to visualize beauty everywhere, it really affected the mind in a very nice way. Yeah. So it began to make more sense to me. And then I thought, okay, you know, like if my teachers do come, then I want to have a beautiful environment. Maybe not to the extent that some other people do. I'm not one for, as you know, for lots of, but to have at least something beautiful and clean. And yes, you know, that makes sense to do that. And then also, you know, if we look in Lama Chöpa, there's a verse about offering your practice that comes right after the mandala offering, yeah? And so I think of, and they often speak of, you know, different kinds of offering, and offering your practice is one way. So I think of, you know, my practice and the social welfare work that I would love to do if I only had many manifestations or lots of disciples who would go and do it, you know, because I can't do everything. You know, and then think of that, you know, the things that I like to offer as come as this beautiful environment, which is symbolic of the offering of your practice. Is that making sense? Because when you offer your practice, you know, you put it, if you, I don't have the verse with me, but you know, the virtues of, you know, the different vehicles manifest as flowers, and you have the pond with the lotuses, and the results of the path are all fruits on fruit trees, and you know, and so that's offering your practice. And so, you know, I can definitely relate to that, you know, thinking of the virtue you create and that everybody else creates, and you imagine this beautiful environment and offer that. Yeah. So I'm not saying that this is the way you have to do. Some of you may just love the visualized offerings. Yeah, but I'm just, for those of you who had difficulty with it, I'm sharing my own experience and how I've kind of turned that around a bit. Yeah, but I still prefer to offer the practical things and the, yeah, and to imagine, yeah, the outcomes of, you know, flourishing monasteries, flourishing Dharma centers, libraries with books and things like that. But everybody has their own thing.